I first realized the HOA was plotting something when a letter arrived in an envelope thick enough to be a novella. The return address said Law Offices of Pennington and Mays, representing Lakeview Estates Homeowners Association. That already told me two things. They were serious. They were wasting our dues on fancy stationery. I tore it open and scanned the first line. Notice of intent to sue for violations of community cleanliness standards. Apparently, my Hoarder garage was an eyesore that decreased neighborhood property values. That Hoarder garage was my pride, a cavern of tools, car parts, and half-finished inventions. I called it the lab. Sure, it looked chaotic, but I could locate a torque wrench faster than most people find their car keys. That evening, while I was elbow-deep in an old carburetor, my wife Laura came out holding the letter. "Are we getting sued because of your projects again?" she asked. "Technically, they're suing the garage," I said. "I'm just the human attached to it." She rolled her eyes. "You know the HOA hates you, right?" "That's mutual." Still, I agreed to tidy up, which for me meant rearranging piles until they looked like intentional piles. But the HOA wasn't satisfied. Within a week, their lawyer, a polished guy named Mr. Pennington, showed up at my door with two board members in matching polos. Pennington smiled that tight lawyer smile. "Mr. Daniels, we've received multiple complaints about your garage. It violates community standards under Article 3, Section B, visible clutter." I leaned against the doorframe. "It's a garage. It's supposed to be visible clutter." He flipped a folder open. "If you don't comply, we'll be forced to file suit for non-compliance." I shrugged. "You do what you have to do, counselor. I'll keep fixing my truck." They left, fuming. I could hear one of the board members mutter, "He thinks he's untouchable." That night, curiosity got the better of me. I started digging through property records online. I wanted to see who actually owned the strip of land behind our row of houses where the HOA office sat, a small brick building squeezed between the community park and the storage units. 5 clicks later, my jaw dropped. The HOA didn't technically own their office. They leased it, and the lease was up in 60 days. The landlord? A holding company that had just listed the property for sale. I stared at the screen, an idea forming so fast it made me laugh out loud. The next morning, I called the real estate agent. "Hey, I saw you've got that office lot on Lakeside Drive listed. Still available?" She sounded surprised. "Yes, though the current tenant's the Lakeview HOA. Are you looking for investment property?" "You could say that," I said. By noon, I'd toured the building. 2 offices, a small conference room, and the same pretentious sign out front reading Lakeview Estates HOA headquarters. The price was steep, but doable. I'd been sitting on savings from selling my old boat restoration business. Laura thought I was kidding when I told her. "You want to buy the HOA office?" "I don't want to. I need to." "Just to prove a point?" "Exactly." We closed 3 weeks later. The ink had barely dried when I received another letter. Same fancy stationery, same signature. It was a formal complaint. Failure to remove clutter, intent to sue. So I sent a letter back, on the same letterhead I'd just inherited with the building. To the Lakeview Estates HOA Board, as the new owner of 114 Lakeside Drive, I regret to inform you that your lease has expired. You have 30 days to vacate the premises. I might have laughed a little too hard sealing that envelope. A few days later, my doorbell rang again. It was Pennington, flanked by the same 2 board members. "You bought our office," he said flatly. I nodded. "And your rent check's about to bounce." "You can't just—" "I can," I said. "It's property law. Maybe you should read the deed." They left in a fury. I could almost hear the collective migraine forming across the neighborhood. Within a week, the HOA tried to fight back with an emergency meeting. Flyers went up. Urgent, community meeting to discuss board relocation and legal response. I went too, sitting quietly in the back while Pennington tried to explain how an individual resident exploited a loophole. When he said exploited, I raised my hand. "You mean bought property legally, right?" The room erupted in murmurs. Someone whispered, "Wait, he owns the office now? Pennington's face turned the shade of a stop sign. "Mr. Daniels, this isn't the time." "Seems like it is," I said. "You wanted to sue me over my garage. Turns out I own your building. Guess we're even." The crowd burst into laughter. Even a few board members couldn't hide their smirks. That was the night the HOA learned something. Never pick a fight with a guy who reads property deeds for fun.
The next few weeks were strangely quiet. No letters, no calls, no clipboard-carrying patrols. For the first time in months, I could work in my garage without looking over my shoulder. I even managed to get the old pickup's engine running again, which felt like poetic justice. Then, one Tuesday morning, a moving truck rumbled into the neighborhood. I stepped outside with my coffee and watched as a crew started unloading boxes labeled HOA Records into the back. Pennington was there, in his neatly pressed suit, trying to maintain an air of dignity while directing people to pack faster. "Morning," I said, leaning on my fence. He gave me a tight smile that didn't reach his eyes. "You've made your point, Mr. Daniels." "Which one?" "I had several." He sighed. "We'll vacate by the end of the week." I raised my mug. "Appreciate your cooperation, tenant." He muttered something that sounded like a law term mixed with a curse and stalked off. Laura watched from the porch, shaking her head. "You're enjoying this way too much. I'm just making sure the deed is respected," I said. When they finally cleared out, I walked through the empty office. The walls still had faded outlines where the HOA mission statement had hung. The carpet smelled like coffee and copier toner. It wasn't much, but it felt like victory. I decided to turn it into a workspace for my projects, an actual workshop away from the house. I hung a sign on the door, "Daniel's Garage Annex." A week later, a new letter arrived, this time not from Pennington, but from a smaller firm downtown. Apparently, the HOA had hired a new lawyer. The letter accused me of retaliatory property acquisition and intent to destabilize the governance of Lakeview Estates. Laura read it aloud and laughed so hard she nearly dropped it. "Retaliatory property acquisition, that's a new one. Guess I'm an innovator," I said. I called their new lawyer the next day. A nervous voice answered, "Mr. Daniels. This is Kyle from Moore and Bentley. I'm handling the HOA matter now." "Hi, Kyle. How's your lease looking these days?" I asked casually. There was a pause. "Our lease. Just curious." "Wouldn't want you to have to move unexpectedly," he stammered. We're fine. Thank you." The poor guy sounded terrified. He probably had no idea what kind of circus he'd stepped into. Things escalated again when the HOA tried to relocate their operations to a temporary trailer near the park. They put up a big banner, "Lakeview HOA open for business." I walked over the next morning with a folder in hand. "Morning, folks. Just checking permits." Pennington, who had apparently returned as consultant, glared at me. "You can't just inspect us." "Sure I can," I said. "The trailer's on land I own." He blinked. "You don't own the park." "No, but I own the lot behind it, the only legal access path to this space." "You're trespassing." That got their attention. Within 24 hours, the trailer vanished like it had never been there. Laura called it the shortest government relocation in history. Then the story spread. Someone on the neighborhood Facebook group posted, "When your HOA lawyer threatens to sue your messy garage and you end up buying their building." Within a day, it had hundreds of likes and a thread full of laughing emojis. Even people from neighboring communities chimed in with stories of their own HOA nightmares. For a while, I felt like a local folk hero. Kids would ride by on bikes, shouting, "Hey, Mr. Daniels, did you really evict the HOA?" I'd grin and wave. "Read the deed, boys." But not everyone was amused. A few of the board loyalists still plotted revenge. They tried to propose new regulations, things like mandatory visual inspections of all garages every 6 months. At the next community meeting, I raised my hand. "Before we vote on that, quick question. Where's your office these days?" The silence that followed was delicious. Finally, one member muttered, "We're still looking for a permanent location." "Well," I said, "I happen to have office space available. Reasonable rent comes with a friendly reminder to mind your business." The laughter that followed effectively ended the meeting. That night, sitting on the dock behind the cabin, Laura asked, "So what now? You've proven your point. I think I'll keep the office. Maybe lease it to someone who knows how to read paperwork." "You're impossible." "Maybe," I said. "But I'm legally impossible." She shook her head, smiling, and we watched the sun set over the lake, the water calm and golden. For the first time, the neighborhood was quiet. No complaints, no letters. Just the hum of summer evenings and the sound of my old truck idling in the driveway.
By late August, peace had more or less returned. My garage projects were humming along, the neighbors had stopped whispering, and the HOA board was officially operating out of someone's spare bedroom. But like a bad sequel, they weren't done yet. I got another letter, thinner this time, but the tone was pure drama. It read, "Notice of community action. The HOA board intends to vote on a resolution revoking the membership privileges of any homeowner who intentionally disrupts community governance." In plain English, they wanted to kick me out of the HOA. Laura found me at the kitchen table reading it. She frowned. "Can they even do that?" "Not legally," I said. "But watching them try might be entertaining." I spent the next day doing what they should have done from the start, reading their own bylaws. And wouldn't you know it, Section 1A clearly stated that all homeowners within the deeded property boundaries were automatic members. The only way to remove someone was to physically remove the property itself. So I showed up at their next meeting, held awkwardly in the treasurer's living room. The room was packed, board members, a few nosy neighbors, and Pennington, who had somehow talked his way back into the job. He stood at the front, smoothing his tie. "We're here to address the disruptive actions of Mr. Daniels, whose conduct has brought disrepute to the association." I raised my hand. "Disrepute? I improved your property values. I evicted a bunch of lawyers." A few people chuckled. Pennington's jaw tightened. "Mr. Daniels, this is a formal proceeding." "Then let's make it formal," I said. I pulled a folder from my bag and flipped it open. "According to your own bylaws, you can't revoke a homeowner's membership. The HOA is defined by the deeded area, which includes my property, whether you like it or not." He adjusted his glasses, scanning the document. I could see his eyes dart across the text as he realized I was right. Someone in the back whispered, "He actually read the bylaws?" I grinned. "Always read the fine print, or, the deed." After that meeting, the tension deflated. The board stopped trying to push me out, mostly because every attempt ended in some new embarrassment. But Pennington wasn't ready to quit. 2 weeks later, a notice arrived from his law firm, a civil claim for defamation, arguing that I had damaged his professional reputation by publicly mocking the HOA. Laura groaned when she saw it. "He's suing you personally now?" "Let him try," I said. "He's suing his landlord." That part wasn't just sarcasm. Remember that building I'd bought? I hadn't sold it. In fact, after the HOA moved out, I'd leased half the space to a small accounting firm, and the other half to none other than Pennington and Mays, attorneys at law. Apparently, their paralegal hadn't realized the new leaseholder was me, so I drafted a polite letter back. "Dear Mr. Pennington, I've received your claim. However, per Section 6 of your current lease, you are required to notify the landlord, that's me, before initiating any legal action against said landlord. Failure to comply may result in eviction. Sincerely, your landlord." I didn't even need a lawyer, just common sense and a stapler. 2 days later, I got a one-line email in response. Claim withdrawn. When I told Laura, she laughed so hard she had to sit down. "You mean the HOA lawyer tried to sue his own landlord?" "Technically, yes, which makes this my favorite legal comedy." Word spread fast. By now, our neighborhood Facebook group was basically a fan club for the saga. Someone even made a meme, a picture of my messy garage with the caption, "The most expensive garage in HOA history." I wasn't proud exactly, but I didn't mind either. A few weeks later, there was another knock at my door. It was Pennington again, looking less like a lawyer and more like someone who hadn't slept in days. "Mr. Daniels," he said stiffly, "the board has decided to dissolve the HOA." I blinked. "You're serious?" He nodded. "Without an office, funds are tight, and frankly, no one wants to be on the board anymore." For a second, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. "Well," I said, "I guess that means my garage is officially off limits." He sighed. "You win." "I didn't win," I said. "I just read what I paid for." He started to turn away, then paused. "Out of curiosity, what are you planning to do with the building?" I smiled. "Haven't decided yet. Maybe a workshop, maybe a coffee shop, or maybe I'll rent it back to you. At market rate." For the first time, he actually laughed. "You're impossible." "So I've heard." For the first time in months, the neighborhood felt lighter. No more enforcement emails, no more late fees for improper trash can placement. And me? I started transforming that old office building. I knocked down a wall, put in new lighting, and turned one of the rooms into a full-scale wood shop. Above the door, I hung a new sign, "Garage Law, where projects beat paperwork." Even Laura had to admit it had a nice ring to it. Winter came early that year, the kind that made the lake look like a sheet of glass and the pines dusted in sugar. Most of the neighborhood had settled into a peaceful routine. No board meetings, no citations, just normal people living normal lives. I'd turned the old HOA office into my workshop/community hangout. The big front window that once displayed Lakeview Estates HOA now read in clean white paint, "Daniels Garage & Co." Inside, it smelled like sawdust, oil, and fresh coffee. On Saturdays, a few neighbors stopped by with projects, fixing lawnmowers, refinishing furniture, or just talking shop. One morning, old Mrs. Green, the same lady who used to send complaint emails about everyone's mailboxes, brought me a broken rocking chair. "Figured you'd be the man to fix it," she said. I smiled. "Sure thing, Mrs. Green. No fine for that one." She chuckled. "Best thing that ever happened to this place was you buying that building." That was the first time anyone in the neighborhood had said something nice about the HOA saga. Around February, I started getting mail addressed to Daniels Properties LLC. Turns out word had spread that I'd done well buying commercial real estate, and now a few local businesses wanted to lease space from me. That gave me an idea. Remember the accounting firm that rented half of my building? They told me the law firm next door, Pennington and Mays, was behind on rent. When I checked the lease, I saw they were 3 months overdue. So, I did what any responsible landlord would do. I sent a polite notice of late payment and a reminder that eviction proceedings could begin after 30 days. A week later, my office phone rang. "Mr. Daniels," came the familiar weary voice. "Mr. Pennington," I said cheerfully. "How's business?" "Slow," he admitted. "The HOA was most of our workload." I almost felt bad. Almost. "Well," I said, "maybe you should consider a new specialty, something less community-oriented." He sighed. "You're enjoying this too much." "Not at all," I said. "I just like things being fair." There was a long pause, then, "We'll vacate the office by the end of the month." "Appreciated," I said, and hung up. A month later, their side of the building was empty. I stood in the doorway, looking at the rows of empty file cabinets and faded nameplates. It was strange. The same space that once held letters threatening fines and lawsuits now echoed with silence. I decided to turn that half into a small coffee shop. Nothing fancy, just a few tables, good espresso, and a place for locals to hang out. I called it the Deed Cafe. Laura rolled her eyes when she saw the sign go up. You just couldn't resist. "Hey, branding matters," I said. The place became a hit. People loved the coffee, and they loved the story even more. Tourists passing through would ask, "Wait, you're the guy who bought the HOA office?" "Guilty," I'd say, handing them a cappuccino. One sunny afternoon as I was closing up, a familiar car pulled into the lot, a shiny sedan, still spotless even after winter mud. Pennington stepped out, wearing jeans instead of his usual suit. "I had to see it," he said, looking around the place. "You actually turned it into a cafe." "Yeah, turns out people prefer coffee to complaints." He laughed quietly. "You know, Daniels, you're a menace, but I'll give you this. You won." "I didn't win," I said. "I just stopped playing their game." He nodded, then ordered a coffee. For a moment, we just stood there like two people who'd finally put the fight behind them. As he left, he paused at the door. "Out of curiosity, who owns the lot next to this?" I grinned. "Working on it." He shook his head and laughed all the way back to his car. That night, I sat with Laura on the dock, watching the lights of the cafe glow across the water. "Do you ever miss the chaos?" she asked. I thought about it. The letters, the meetings, the absurdity of it all. "Maybe a little," I said. "It was fun proving that paperwork works both ways." She smiled. "You're never going to let that go, are you?" "Not while the deed's still in my name." We sat in silence for a while, the lake perfectly still. Somewhere out there, a loon called across the water, and I realized I'd never heard the neighborhood so peaceful. No HOA patrols, no threats, no drama, just home. A few months later, a new sign appeared on the far side of town. Lakeview Commons, managed by Daniels Properties. Laura nearly spit out her coffee when she saw it. "You bought another one?" "Technically," I said, "just managing. But who knows, maybe next year?" She shook her head, laughing. "You're unstoppable." "Just well documented," I said. And as the sun dipped behind the lake, turning the water gold, I couldn't help but grin. Turns out, all it took to beat the HOA was a garage full of tools, a sense of humor, and a perfectly signed deed. The end.